My nephew saw me wearing a mini skirt, then did this, a real infidelity story. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you watching from and also like and subscribe for more updates. Events, I possess a story about that. Haven't shared with many as it is sophisticated. Have you ever encountered the sense of walking on a thin line, limit separating good from bad, not out of desire yet in line with life events? That reflected my opinion on that specific day, as though the cosmos owned a contradictory sense of humor, and I was the topic of its genesis. It all started on a Saturday afternoon, is not too noteworthy. I was doing nothing remarkable in a slow weekend I spent working on some home duties, accompanied just by the gentle hum of the dryer, during sifting from my wardrobe to identify objects for donate. I came into an old miniskirt, although I no longer dress in such clothes. I thought I had gone past that period. But when I carried the skirt, memories exploded. It was a remnant of my young years when confidence was natural and living centered on enjoyment and liberation on demand. I decided to give it a shot. On and slid into it, I had poor expectations. However, while looking into the mirror, I couldn't hold back a laugh at how the garment grabbed to me more tightly, more than I remembered, stressing both unpleasant and maybe lovely places. I was merely testing to see if it aligned when I heard a tap at the door, whose name I whispered might it be? My hair was messy, and I was not attired to leave an impact either, nor was I expecting anyone to show up when I responded at the door and stood there. Nephew Jason was no longer a young man. He had grown fully strong at 22. Having wide shoulders and a sense of confidence, he was the kind of person. Somebody walking into a room and captivating. He paid attention and carried a tool bag, showing a casual smile he regularly wore. Auntie as asked about the dripping tap, I remembered that I had entirely neglected to ask. He was here to fix the wash basin in the guest bathroom, despite my feelings somewhat embarrassed about my chosen clothes, not to stress it, and instead laughed. If it is off, kindly visit the bathroom. Found down the hall, he passed I and he watched him momentarily. He situates his eye on me, before quickly, possibly it was only my fantasy. However, there was a strange setting. Jason started his, while I went back to my house, I worked on the ideas closet, yet all along I felt a strange, neither expected nor bad as tension. You know the feeling when someone's eyes stay too long. Though they try for subtlety, I first wrote it off as merely thinking too much, given he is my nephew. But when I passed the toilet, get something out of the kitchen, Jason quickly shouted out, "Hey, Auntie, would you kindly visit here for a little time?" Believe I need help. The later occurrences aggravated my uncertainty. When I got to the toilet, I discovered Jason slumped with his arms folded up to show his strong tanning arms, clutching a wrench in one hand, and waved towards the wash basin with the Oxman. Other than that, I think the pipe is jammed, said, looking up at me. Can you hold this while I work to relax it? Nodding, I slanted forward to grab the tap. The bathroom was small. Before I understood that we were almost shoulder, I tried to ignore Tush's shoulder. The proximity, yet I could detect the friendliness of his arm brushing mine as he worked. I looked at him, and that was. When I saw it, Jason wasn't only fixed on the pipe in front of him, often turned to me as if he were trying to see anything. It was faint, not obvious to others, because I saw everything as being good. I asked to change the stillness. He fixed on me, and for a not long ago showed resistance before. Grinning in his usual calm manner, joined in my nervous laughing as I sought to release the stress. Well, you are the professional, right? There was no pressure. Nonetheless, I couldn't ignore in which his eyes stayed for immense. Too soon, after a few minutes, he released the pipe and rose at last. He was dusting his hands on his trousers, all balleth. Done should be as good as fresh, he stated. Thank you. My response, aimed at trying to, seemed indifferent. He said, "You're a lifesaver," as he leaned against the counter opposite me with an enigmatic phrase. You know, Aunt, I think I have seen you in a tie once, like that before, momentarily stopping my rinning. Oh, this I answered with a forced chuckle, tugging at the hem of Vop. The miniskirt serves only as something I found at the rear, pertaining to the objects from my closet, meant forgive Jason for silence. He kept staring at me with his eyes, betraying an ineffable feeling. Then he grinned, except this time it was different, nearly as though he knew it would fit you. His voice was softer than usual, I noted, fumbled and ran out of words. Thank you. I guess having experienced self-awareness, I looked to right away go to the toilet, hoping to deposit some gap separating us. Yet as I left, Jason followed in his near proximity. Behind, Addie said, halting me. I turned up the corridor to meet him. My heart pounding, yes. He stopped as if he were looking for the appropriate language. You ever sense as though something has happened for a reason, what you imply? I asked, so perplexed he started to expand his mouth, said something, then shook his head, laughing it off. Never mind said anything except I couldn't overlook the way. He peered at me, the tone of his voice stuck with me long after he went that night. I was nestled on the couch idly turning through channels vying for freedom from the discomfort from past times, kept repeating personally. There was nothing I was overanalyzing the whole thing. After all, Jason was family. But even as I started, on my phone, to feel normal once more, buzzed on the coffee table, I bent over. Lifting it up, it revealed a message from Jason. Hey, Auntie, might I ask you? Anything. I fixed my gaze on the television, arguing whether to respond with anything regarding the unusual time that seemed weird. Why? He texting me right now after some time. Answered naturally what you are thinking about. His answer arrived practically. I find myself thinking instantly on now, and everything seemed different. Shocked me. Maybe my stomach had a minimal flutter. What was he trying to show? My fingers stopped over the machine as I considered my answer. At last, I chose a neutral response. I was only browsing some vintage clothing. He picked up my message right away, looked at the little typing indicator. Seemed despite it took him some time to answer when his final message arrived. You were somewhat astonished. Hey, I really am honest in my words. Looked at the television in wonder. Was this truly a benign pulse racing comment, or was there a more underlying implication? I wasn't sure how to feel, much less how should one respond following what appeared to be an eternity. I responded, thanks, Jason, back off. I wanted it. Compliments are valued. Would end the matter even though seeing it automatically would not, he said. Once more unsure about whether to voice this, but I encountered a feeling today. My breath felt choked in my throat. I was exploring onto dangerous ground, and I wasn't sure how Jason negotiated. It was not only a friend, he was my nephew's. Whatever feelings he felt, he was experiences that led to misdirection, but not discounting him completely, but rather saw myself faltering, maybe out of inquiry or a need to prevent starting. His discomfort, hence I did not react right away, and tight bubble returned, and I withdrew my past comment meant to prevent awkwardness. Shaking slowly, I felt both relieved and confused. I comforted myself. It was only a mistaken thinking he would relocate. Hence normal would be restored, as I laid down my phone and felt that this was just the start of the events. Early the next morning, while I was starting my morning with a cup of coffee, remained messy. I heard a tap at the door that set my heart pounding. I was not expected any guests upon opening. The door, I came upon Jason standing there. His hands in his pockets allow him to seem to be as apathetic as always. Still, there was a clear shift in his mood as his usual carefree. The smile was replaced with a solemn face that I did not understand. I approved, Jason trying to hide. Your actions here astound me. Thus early he entered without waiting for. I was in the area and received an invitation. Considered I should visit. It was a flimsy explained Jason's lack of residence somewhere, close by, so I avoided addressing it instead of confronting him. I followed him into and closed the door. He pointed to the couch in the living room, slanted forward with his elbows on his knees, the air dense with unsaid. Tension is everything, all right? Asked as he sat and looked up, his eyes piercing mine. At me about last night. I didn't mean to give you pain. I inhaled a small breath of comfort, glad he was appreciating the issue it is about. Let us ignore the acceptable. Jason, let us still fully. He shook his head, insisted he could not simply ignore, related to 80 I intended. What I said became frozen, unsure on how to respond. This is not how members of a family should interact. Jason and I started carefully stating, I think you are wrong about your feelings, are false. It is only a reality, he interrupted with a tone that was determined but non-confrontational. I acknowledge it is false and I have been ending to resist. I tried to write off it, but my ideas still ate my pulse. ran, and I felt a mix of feelings: shock, confusion, and a hint of guilt. How did we come to this? Indicate, Jason, I asked, my voice. Quivering, you has to stop. You are my nephew. And this is unacceptable. He nodded slowly. His gaze dropped below. I know it's improper, but I had to say my feelings, since quelling them was torturing me. For a split second, the room was covered in quiet, save for the meager tick of, I was lost in the wall clock, for terms not sure how to fix this condition, or if at all salvageable. In the end, Rose had to make space separating us. Jason, I think you should leave. We both need time to think about this. I watched his expression, a mixture of regret and desire. Very, very nicely, he murmured. But this is not our last conversation. We'll center on mine. This is why he left without more remark, and as the door closed behind him, I felt relief followed by a burst of ongoing worry as the evening sunset stretched broad shadows across the house room. I came upon the edge of an envelope, poking out from under the front door, and my chest tightened as I went towards, totally aware of its sender. Before I ever pulled it, then opened the paper with trembling hands and heart pounding in my ears. Jason clearly had handwriting like this, orderly and exact, as though every syllable has been carefully chosen. The message said, Aunt, I know you asked for my departure, and I honor that, but I cannot feign that these emotions do not exist. I am not asking for anything. Just need you to know that should you want me to detach myself, I would cooperate without thought. On the other hand, should one even finds a modicum of reciprocal sentiment, gently let me know, as I will be Rose here, expecting your answer. Staring at the doubtful whether to feel fear or flattery for rage or many of concepts, they flew over my head. Is he serious? Is it feasible for him to win? I sensed, hence, even now, I hesitated to throw it completely. I folded the paper. I buried it in a drawer, out of sight, but not out of memory. I persuaded myself, knowing I would not respond and that neglecting him was the best way to action. However, deep inside, I realized this never finished later that evening as I tried to sleep with my phone vibrating. Again, Jason was the individual. Jason, I know I said earlier, and I wouldn't annoy you yet. I want validation of your receiving of my message. I fixed on the message, finally considering an answer. I said, yes, I got it. But Jason, this has to stop. His response was rather immediate. It is bad for both of us. I shall stop, should you so want. Please tell me straightforwardly any feeling you have. Because for me, even a small finger's placement over the keyboard acknowledging everything would make the matter worse, and denying it seems dishonest. So I replied, Jay, you're my nephew. That I could say, nothing else. The answer he sought was the only one I could offer the following morning. I showed up for work, ready to take my focus off current events. My work provided my sanctuary, a world there I could focus on chores and leaving personal problems behind. But as I sat at my desk reading over emails, I had an uncomfortable feeling as if someone were watching me. I looked up. Freeze. Jason stood just outside the office window, hands buried deep in his pockets, seeming to be both contradictory and decisive about what he was doing. I whispered beneath my breath, feeling my mind. I quickly excused a chest constriction. I left before he could say anything. Could come in and make the matter worse. Jason, why are you here? I asked, trying to keep a cool head under pressure. Have to visit you, he replied with a quiet yet, you answered with a modest tone. Last night, Jason, I asked questions about Flatter. Previously said that this circumstances is bad. We cannot keep going like this. Conversation, but you did not contradict it, he said. Drawing near, you did not say I felt nothing as I walked. Back my hands grasping my strap of bag. This has nothing to do with feelings, Jason, regarding morality, regardless of your perspective. This to be it. He passed death. He was raking his hand through his hair when understand its immorality. I have reminded myself many times, yet I cannot control my emotions. His words stayed with thick and disturbing. I was at loss for a reaction, so I started to leave. Auntie waited, he cried out, grabbing my arm gently but deliberately, making me froze as I turned to look at his hand. Before he fixed his eyes, there was an unperfect vulnerability in his face that found it difficult to merely leave. I am not trying to turn your life upside down or complicate things for you. I said, I seek explanation about the possibilities should none exists. I will pull his from. declaration, "You won't have to see me once more," caught me with the power of a physical blast. The possibility of his cutting all ties brought about my hearts to throb, but I noticed that ongoing, this scenario would just produce more suffering for Jason as well as Zib. Said I, my voice shaking, "Your family, this is all that it can ever produce." He confirmed with a slow nod, shoulders bowed as he retreated, arranging a chair next to his bed to saying, "All right, I understand, I will don't meddle while I'm observing." I felt as he turned away an paradoxical combination of grief and relief, thinking it would be the end, and that, at last, we may advance. But later that evening I got a call that threw all Jason had in flux. Been in an accident on my amps. His remarks to me arrived at the hospital, changed everything the call had come to represent. Late at night when I was getting ready to call it night and retire, vibrated constantly in the coffee table when I looked at Jason's name. Show on the screen, my stomach dropped. Yet it was not Jason on the queue, it was. Voice of a woman from Mercy General, mentioning your nephew's has been in an accident. He asks for your attendance. Panic tore through me, both inside and without. Inquiring more, I grabbed my keys and rushed out the door when reaching Nedlefty. My heart pounding, I walked into the hospital, the ER via the swinging doors, looking about the room till I saw him. Jason laid on a bed with a slight laceration on his forehead and his arms slung over, looked up as I got to his pallid face, but his eyes kept their familiar strength. What occurred? I asked, my voice tempered with worry. He provided a deschmoling. Actually, a slight smile is really small. Collision. Jason expressed with annoyance. He laughed, but you worried me greatly. Then gracefully frowned, gripping his side. I'm sorry, I wasn't sure who else I let out audible exhalation to contact. Said, I am here right now. Are you doing okay? He did, in fact, nod, his manner softening. Yes, but I have to say something. Not the time. Jason mentioned right now is what he meant. His voice relaxed even with the frailty in his eyes. I did not contact you only because of the accident. I got in touch since I arrived to realization I was confused, not sure of the way this was following. What are you while talking about the issue? He looked at his hands, his fingers trembles anxiously. Edge of the hospital manipulation, as I considered the possibility of not making sense, were driven by my strong love and the awareness of my several faults, together with my will to prevent losing you. Jason, I started to say, but he lifted a hand to stop me from continuing. Interference lets me say this, he begged. I know that I have broke limits and I low myself, desire it, but this is not just a passing flutter. For me, sentimentally, I am more fond. For you instead of what I have for everyone else, and I find it's improper. However, I'm unable to control it. His words stayed in the environment, heavy and unpurposed. I could not find the words I needed. Sought to comfort him, knowing that everything would be good. Still another part aware this was not a matter I could fix with just kind care. Words before my voice could clearly express my ideas. A nurse carried into the room, releasing the anxiety visiting hours are over, she said with politeness, but Rose's forceful smile made her feel both relieved and overwhelmed. Find some rest. Jason, we will talk about this later, nodded while still keeping eye touch as I left, and frequently revisited his driving home. In my mind, statements like these seemed to me had decided the right course by leaving, even knowing I would be returning. Saw an unpleasant presence at the house that made me change my perspective. All when I neared the house radiated a terrible quiet. As I negotiated the driveway, I turned into deleted my shoes and noted an unfamiliar little gift on the kitchen counter, noted with my name in Jason's writings. I slowed down before opening. My hands quivering slightly within, I came into a note and a little photo album. The letter started with, Aunt, I know. You asked that I stop writing. However, I must clarify everything, even if this is our last communication in action. Please read this and review the CD. Then should you wish my absence from your life, I will respect your wishes. I totally opened the letter with my eyes, reading the book from the first moment I came back here and felt a shift in our dynamic. At first, I couldn't understand. I first thought of it as just still respect or adoration, though progressively came clear that it exceeded those feelings. I observe how this might be taken, and I have tried to buck it, but I am inability of doing this changes my feelings. You have regularly encouraged me more. Than all others you have seen my lowest points, and yet offer compassion which I do not take for given nature. Slowed my pulse, feeling the weight of tea. Though his comments were almost overpowering, I kept reading and compiled this CD to jog my memory of all I adore regarding you, not in a way that crosses lines, although as a means of processing my emotions. You will come across pictures of us from family events when you were laughing or simply being you. I am letting you know this since I don't now wish to keep secrets. I'll appreciate any choice you choose, but I couldn't let this go unpackled. I set the letter down and started the CD. The pictures brought back familiar family barbecues, Christmas meals, and haphazard pictures I forgot even remembering being abducted every day. One included a little message in Jason's penmanship noted for minute details. He valued my seeming happiness and how kind I treated others, and the extent he loved my resilience, tears welling up in my eyes told me it was somewhat overblown. Softly caressing and somewhat disturbing, I closed the album and stayed seated for some time, trying to make sense of things. Jason wasn't merely conveying infatuation, he was opening his heart, in a way that seemed untenable to overlook. So what could I do? I turned away from demoralizing him, not simply because it was ethically repudiable, but also due to it would compromise our family, but utterly excluding him seemed equally severe. Thinking about his obvious suffering, feeling before I could decide my path of action, my phone buzzed once more. Jason messaged me, wondering if I had got the package he asked for, validation of its reception, and stated that, should I want him to leave, I should just say so, and he would leave tomorrow. I thought about Jason's statement for what seemed to be an eternity, my feelings running counter with my logic in an uncontrollably chaotic struggle. He had gone with the choice solidly in my hands, a decision with great power to permanently influence not only our life, but also our family responded, guiding Jason to pay a visit the next day for a conversation. The next morning, he showed up consistently displaying anxiety as well as hopeful. I greeted him inside, and we chose chairs next to one another facing. Together in the living room, the environment was loaded with unspoken attitudes. Jason, I started my voice, strong but delicate. I have read the letters and looked over the album. I acknowledge the great attention to detail and work you put in, and I cannot dispute its psychological effect on me, but we needs to set certain limits for both our wellness. He acknowledged my remarks with a nod, even with his manner, stayed wary. I understand. I only told you that is all required of you. I know about my feelings and how aided leaning forward. I have to say that I adore you as family. The extent of my emotions in relation to you result from thankfulness and respect. This is good, yet we should not mix those ideas for a substitute. It finally would be negative for both of us. He looked at his hands, his expression that combines relief with melancholy. I understood. Gently speaking, I want not to lose you, Auntie. I will try to discharge this topic. I waved my hand and grabbed his. Using a little pressure will not lose me. Jason, but you should grab some time to work out the true nature on in your heart. Perhaps chat to someone capable of assisting you in organizing these sentiments. He noted once more, and for the first time I noticed a flutter in days of peace in his perspective. We sat there for a while, extending more time discussing lesser things. He has future plans, and how he wished to concentrate on his work and interests by the time he went. Those circumstances had changed, a weight had been released, weren't fully restored to normal. Jason preserved some space for us both, concentrating on himself and consulting professionals to, over time, work out his emotions. Our relationship returned to something near what it had been before, supportive family and free from cloudiness, ambiguity. It wasn't simple, but we both derived knowledge from the event. The need of creating limits and confronting problems squarely, while Jason discovered clarity in a self that not depending on anyone else. Looking back, I am appreciative of our ability to negotiate such a challenging condition, devoid of losing the link of paramount importance household.